Somebody suggested that I read a comment on one of my YouTube posts about me explaining how I got involved in apologetics and how I got involved in comparative religion and apologetics, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought this was a pretty I thought this was a pretty good video to make or to tell my story about how I got involved in Islamic apologetics. And well, where I'm coming from. This person wrote, "And how did you get into apologetics and research of comparative religion? Has it improved your life and mindset and intellect? Have you gained anything from it? Any new books you have ordered?" So I'll try to answer all these questions in one video because I thought this topic would make a good video subject or topic. So, if my viewers really want to know how I got involved in apologetics, and how I got involved in Islam and debates and all that, Islamic apologetics debates, all that stuff, it's really I think I've talked to Mensch or the Muslim apologist about this, but go into I didn't tell the full story of how I got involved in apologetics and how I got involved in religious debates and stuff like that. And the reason why is because it's kind of a emotional and sad story about how I got involved in apologetics, and it's a pretty dark story. So whatever, I'll just explain the situation right now. If you want the simple reason why I got involved in religion to begin with, the reason why I got involved with religion and to begin with was there was two people in my life that I met where I was forced to turn to God. There was a time in my life when I didn't care about God, I didn't care about religion. I just wanted to make as much money as possible, get done and get my college degree, get the hell out of school, and possibly go to Hollywood and get my movie script made. That was my life goals. But as the Quran says, man plans and God is the best of planners. In the Quran, chapter 3, verse 54, they planned and Allah planned, but Allah is the best of planners. So you're going to hear the full story of how I got involved in apologetics. And I got to tell you, it is a pretty dark and sad story. The two people who got me involved was a woman and a Catholic priest. Now, when you go to university, most people who go to university don't care about religion. They enter into university and they don't become outright atheists, but they stop caring about religion. Most of the time that happens. Not all the time, but most of the time, doesn't matter if they're Christian, Muslim, whatever. If they go to college, eventually religion will fade away and they'll focus on other things. That's what happened to me. So what happened was I met a woman, and unfortunately things between me and her did not work out the way I wanted it to work out. So I'm stuck with, you know, I don't know, like a $6,000 engagement ring. No engagement. My life isn't going the way I want it to go. So enter the Catholic priest. This Catholic priest was one of my teachers, and after the class ended, we stayed in touch. I asked him why he was involved in apologetics, why he was a Catholic priest, why he was involved in religion. But because I used to think religion in general, doesn't matter what religion it was, it's just a waste of time. That's what I used to think because there are other things you could do with your time. You know, try to make as much money as possible, focus on your career, focus on your life goals, whatever. So this man said something which I'll always remember. He said the reason why I'm a Christian, or the reason why I'm a Catholic, is John chapter 3 verse 16. John chapter 3 verse 16, or the Gospel of John chapter 3 verse 16, is, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, and whosoever shall believe in him shall not perish but have eternal life. I'm not a Christian, but I have to admit that John chapter 3 verse 16 is a very powerful and moving verse. So this Catholic priest never got married, never got kids. So I thought that was very unique because all the people I knew were having girlfriends, getting married, etc., etc. And this man was full on celibate. Celibate means you don't get married, you don't have sex, or you don't form any kind of relationship with a woman. So I thought that appealed to me. And this man was one of the most devoted Christians I ever encountered, or devoted Catholic or Christians that I encountered. Like he took his Christian faith very seriously, to the point where he was imitating Jesus, because Jesus and John the Baptist never got married and never had sexual intercourse, and I thought that was very interesting. So as time went on, he gave me a Bible, and I read the entire Bible. I read it from the Old Testament and New Testament. And what I found was that there was a severe disconnect between the Old Testament and New Testament. The New Testament says different things than the Old Testament, and the Old Testament says different things than what the New Testament teaches about theology, about God, about the nature of God, about the sinful nature of prophets and the sinless nature of Jesus. The New Testament praises people like, praises people like David, Noah, uh, Abraham, etc. But if you read the Old Testament, you see that there were severe moral problems with Prophet David, Prophet Abraham, Noah. These men were they were morally flawed men. Uh, so it seems like, the Old Testament was telling me something different than what the New Testament was telling me. There were two different books with two different theologies that couldn't be reconciled. Uh, so this kind of bothered me about Christianity. The other thing was, when I was researching Christianity with that Catholic priest, we ran into, or I discovered the books by Dr. Bart Ehrman. Now, I don't agree with everything Bart Ehrman says, but he did have some good points debunking the textual reliability of the New Testament. Then I read some works, or I read some, I think I watched a debate, or I read some books with Dr. Richard Carrier. Richard Carrier is one of the people who say that Jesus didn't exist. And um, but I don't agree with that conclusion. But Dr. Richard Carrier actually helped me understand the origins of the New Testament, and why Jesus was probably not resurrected, etc., etc. So if you want to know what killed my confidence in Christianity, it was Bart Ehrman and Dr. Richard Carrier. Now, I know these people are atheists. I know they're anti-supernaturalists, et cetera, et cetera. I know that. But their scholarship and their conclusions and their methodology to analyze the New Testament and to refute the arguments given for the New Testament were very strong. Now, I don't agree with everything they say, but they do have some very good points that Christian apologists um, weren't able to give a sufficient, or weren't able to give a satisfying response to. So, if you really want to know why I didn't convert to Christianity, it was because of those two, Dr. Richard Carrier and Dr. Bart Ehrman's works. Then I saw a debate with Dr. Richard Carrier and Mike Lacona on was Jesus resurrected, and I think Carrier had stronger points than Lacona. Now, winning a debate, it has no connection to being right, but Richard Carrier was given some good points that weren't uh, refuted by Mike Lacona in a satisfying way. So at this point, I realized there was just too many problems with the Bible, or there was too many contradictions between the Old Testament and New Testament. These two books could not be reconciled. So I looked into the other religion, Islam, and it seemed like a lot of the criticisms against Islam could be thrown back against the Bible more forcibly. So I have to give some credit, and I have to give some credit where credit is due with Answering Islam, because before I read the Answering Islam website, I had no idea about the satanic verses, about Ibn Ishaq, about the history of Al-Tabari, about the arguments or the criticisms against the Prophet Muhammad. I had no idea about any of that stuff or any of the criticisms against Islam. Thanks to Answering Islam, they organized those arguments and they gave me references, and I knew they were being inconsistent because I knew reading the Bible that whatever arguments they threw against the Quran or Islam or the Prophet Muhammad could be thrown back against the Bible. Whether it's moral issues with the Prophet Muhammad, whether it was the Quran source, so-called sources, et cetera, it could be thrown back against the Bible. So they were using atheist arguments against Islam while claiming to be Christian, and you can't do that. You either go full atheist, then attack all religion, or you be consistent and apply the same criticisms to your own religion. So if you're a Muslim criticizing the Bible, you have to look at Islam critically too. And if you're a Christian attacking the Quran and Islam, you have to be critical with the Bible, or you have to point fingers at the Bible too. There's no way out here. I have never met a consistent Christian who's willing to argue against the Bible the same way they argue against Islam. So there was a consistency problem with Answering Islam. They just wanted to keep throwing arguments against Islam while ignoring their Bible, and those arguments didn't work. So, realizing this and given the evidences for the prophethood of Muhammad, given the prophecies, etc., the prophecies of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, etc., then I realized Islam was probably the more coherent or logical choice or a consistent choice as opposed to Christianity. Because if I converted to Christianity, I can't ignore the Old Testament. And the Old Testament is different, or says and teaches different things than the New Testament. So there's already a disconnect there. But the moral character of Jesus had a positive impact on me. The fact that Jesus never got married and he never had sexual intercourse really resonated with me or really spoke to me. John chapter 3, verse 16 is a very powerful verse. John chapter 3, verse 16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten son, was a very powerful verse because it talks about a parent's sacrifice of a child for people who just don't deserve it. It's a very powerful verse, I'll admit this. So, I don't know, there was a lot of things in my life that where I couldn't escape God and I couldn't escape religion. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. Like, if I had everything I wanted, if I had everything I wanted, then I probably would have never went to apologetics and religion. There's a really good verse there's a really good part in our story. There's a really good teaching of Jesus in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, if the world hates you, keep in mind it's hated me first. And keep in mind, Jesus tells the disciples that the world is going to hate you, the world's going to reject you, the world is going to persecute you. But the reason why that's happening is because we're not of the world. God has chosen us out of the world. So that's why the world hates you. There's a similar teaching in Islam where the Prophet Muhammad said the world is a paradise for the disbeliever and a prison for the believer. So basically, just because you do the right thing, just because you follow theology, or you want to or you're following God's rules, that doesn't mean good things are going to happen to you on earth. In fact, the exact opposite happens when you do those things. So I think that really spoke to me. It really moved me to do the right thing for a higher power, even if there's no rewards for it. Just because you do the right thing, that doesn't mean you're guaranteed money, sex, or power. And I learned this the hard way. My life wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. I didn't have the money and I didn't have power. And if you don't have money and power, you're basically a loser. You're basically nobody. But I always tried to do the right thing, because doing the right thing, despite the rewards, was the way of Jesus, was the way of the Prophet Muhammad. So these two examples really motivated me to get involved in Islamic apologetics, because I believed it was the right thing to do, despite my lack of power, et cetera, despite my lack of popularity. So there is a lot of things in my life that led me into, I couldn't escape God and I couldn't escape religion. I think it was my destiny, after I met that Catholic priest, that there was no way out. I had to submit to a higher power. I had to submit to God. It gave me comfort and it gave me hope. And when you have hope, there's very little other people can do to take that away from you. Um, I've made some enemies. I've definitely made some enemies, but I don't know. You just got to put your faith in God, and you just got to have that hope. Because if you don't have hope, then I don't know, things just become very dark and lonely as time goes on. You just got to have hope in something, some higher power or something. The spiritual atheism didn't work for me. Spiritual atheism is, the saying, if nothing we do matters, then if nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do. But there's no objective reason for doing the right thing if you're an atheist. It's just one subjective opinion over the other subjective opinion. So this is why, I'm highly against atheism, because it just kind of doesn't make any sense. Uh, at least when it comes to moral issues, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I think there was a lot of things in my life where I just could not escape religion. I couldn't turn my back on it. My destiny became religion, apologetics, et cetera. There was no way I could get out of it. Uh, sometimes your life doesn't go the way you want it to go. I thought at this point I would be married, I would have kids. Who knows? Maybe I would have made it into Hollywood. Maybe I would have gotten my script made into a movie or a TV show. But that's not the way how life works. Sometimes things just they go in a different route than what you think they would go. But I have hope, and I have a guarantee of salvation. And when you have those things, I think that's all you need. You might not get what you always want in life, but sometimes God just gives you what you need and not what you always want. So I think that was my origin story, if you will, about how I got into apologetics. Uh, as for any new books, no. I mean, I read Bart Ehrman a lot, his books, and I'm reading a lot of material to refute atheism. So that would just be my. I read Darwin's Doubt by Stephen Myers, where he refutes atheistic claims about evolution and the origin of life, or he refutes, evolution and Darwin's claims. So I think Stephen Myers was a theist, and his books are really good at refuting Darwinism, evolution, etc., etc. So my point is, if you're a Muslim apologist, etc., etc., you're going to make enemies, and people are going to hate you, and you're going to receive a lot of criticisms and backlash from other people, but you just gotta have hope, and you just gotta trust in God's word, and you just gotta do what you think is right in the end of the day, because no one's gonna hold your hand and guide you. You know, I learned this the hard way. You have to do things on your own, and you have to do what you think is right. If you're a Muslim apologist or a theist or whatever, so you have to make your own choices regarding certain issues, etc., etc. Is it going to be a hard journey? Yes. Is it going to be a lonely journey? Not always, because sometimes you do have support from the greater community of Muslims or theists, if you're some kind of other theist. So I don't know. I mean, I think my advice would be just do what you think is right. You know, no one's gonna help you. You have to be responsible, and you just got to do what you believe is the right thing to do. And if you do that, and if you have that hope, and if you have that motivation, then you're unstoppable. Then you're in a path that they can't take away from you, that no one can take away from you. You're in a progressive path that no one can take away from you, and that's just me. You know, I just have that hope, and I have that faith. And when you got that hope, and when you got that faith that a higher power is helping you in this world, you know, even when you don't deserve it, I think that's a very I think that's a very powerful thing, and I think that's a very motivating thing to keep that just keeps me going, that keeps me getting up and doing what I need to do, because I know there's somebody looking out for me above, that there's a God looking out for me above, and he might not always give me what I want, but he'll always give me what I need, and that's all I need to keep moving forward. So that's my story. I hope everybody learned from it, and I hope everybody learns the responsibility of doing your own thing, despite the rewards that come with it, or doing the right thing, the responsibility to do the right thing, even if there's no rewards for it. You know, I hope this helps, or this serves as some kind of lesson or some kind of motivation for any future apologists out there. That's my story. Adesham Gulam out.